Hey, good afternoon. Greetings. Thanks for coming along. The Thursday edition of The Ride Home. How you doing, Kath?
I'm okay. Thanks, John.
Yeah, good.
I was outside. I took an hour and sat out in the sun.
Very nice.
Because
Sun's gone now,
I'm
right?
trying to soak it in.
Yep, because times
Trying
are
to
changing.
soak it in. So if you have seasonal affective disorder, and I'm not making light of it, but if you have it, can you store it up?
Put it in the bank, you mean?
Yeah, because the challenge with solar energy, as I understand it, from my unbelievably limited perspective, is that you can get the solar energy, but it's very hard to store it.
I see.
So that you can use it efficiently, right?
Right.
I feel like the same thing is the case with our own personal conversion of solar energy. I could stay outside all day today, but is that going to help me at the end of November?
Probably not. No, I think,
That's
and
what
you
I
know
thought,
it's coming because it's been so beautiful out. And
It's been so,
It's gonna change
so nice out.
yeah, such is life. I'm sorry. I got a little medical update here for you.
Isn't that why we tune in?
Okay.
Oh, wait, that's not why we tune in.
To hear about my maladies.
Because I didn't know we were. Is this a new segment? Do
This-
you have music for this, Christy?
I was not prepared.
Okay.
It's John Maladies update. Listen, yesterday I bit inside my mouth.
Oh, I know. Yep.
Now, between yesterday and today, I've continued to bite that same spot 50, maybe 60 times. I imagine inside of my mouth there's like this gigantic hunk of flesh, and I'm biting. What is the deal with that?
I know. All of a sudden, it's like you bite it one time, and the next 8 days of your life, you're just re-injuring yourself.
Right. So, the goal is to not speak and especially to not eat.
Right. And then you think, do I always chew with this much force? Is that a regular thing for me?
Oh, holy! I've injured myself, enjoying like a junior mint. or
Right.
something.
What's going on?
I didn't even
a
mean to-
junior mint. I haven't had a junior mint in a long time.
Oh, I love a junior mint.
You know what I had, though, the other day?
Huh.
Peppermint patty.
Oh, it was kind of like a large junior
I
mint.
think I actually think it's a improved junior mint.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
It's like junior mint is for a rookie. But for a veteran,
Pro.
you go with the peppermint patty.
How about a frozen peppermint patty?
It's the only way.
Oh, ho. Now you're talking.
It's
Listen,
the only way.
I'd happily bite my mouth 50 more times to have one of those right now. Just
I got a little, they had a buy one, get one free situation at my neighborhood shop and save.
wait, on peppermint patties?
For in advance of Halloween.
Full size?
No,
Oh,
just
little
the little
baby
ones. So I got 2 of those and put those in my freezer.
Two bags.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so tempting.
That's a low calorie, it's the lowest fat candy. Did you know that? Of all the candies?
I did not know that.
That's true.
Reason enough to tune in to the ride home.
Aren't you glad? You guys.
Reason enough. You get to hear about me biting my mouth and peppermint patty.
And plus, if you want to watch us, I want you to.
Here, I'll
I
show
really
you my
do.
mouth.
No.
Can I show you my mouth?
Stop it. The Ride Home, streaming live on YouTube at The Word Pittsburgh. Put your comments, questions, whatever in there. Nancy and I were talking yesterday about her crazy uncle.
Oh, what?
Yep.
Who's crazy Uncle Nance?
Because you're not looking at the YouTube stream.
No, I'm sorry. I'm
All
too
right.
busy here doing the live show.
Yeah, I understand.
Sorry. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Anyway, without further ado.
By the way, I'm doing the live show too. It's not like I'm not doing it. I didn't want to let that sit there like, oh yeah, Kathy's not doing
Kath,
the live
I know.
show.
She brought up the peppermint patty. Without further ado, Kath, please, the top stories. Give us the top 4 at 4.
Coming right up, John.
Wait, nothing beats a peppermint patty and
For
mouth
Thursday.
biting.
It's National Dessert Day. We'll talk about that later.
Okay.
It's Thursday, October 14th, 2021. Number 1. Defense attorneys for the man accused of killing 11 people at the Tree of Life Synagogue building in Squirrel Hill on October 27th of 2018 have asked Senior U.S. District Judge Danetta Ambrose to suppress statements made by their client that day, including that, quote, all these Jews needed to die. According to today's Trib, they argued in a motion filed on the matter that any statements made by the accused were coerced by officers and not made voluntarily, and that anything said by him during the course of medical treatment should not be used against him. A Pittsburgh homicide detective then testified he read the suspect his Miranda rights, and immediately the accused invoked his right to remain silent and have an attorney present for questioning. From that point forward, the detective said he did not ask the suspect any other questions relative to the attack. A hearing on the suppression motion began Tuesday and concluded yesterday. The accused, aged 49, did not attend after his attorneys waived his presence last week. Number 2. Microsoft said it is shutting down its LinkedIn service in China later this year after internet rules were tightened by Beijing, becoming the latest American tech giant to lessen its ties to the country.
We couldn't figure it out either.
I know, right?
What are we doing?
Why were you using that? Earlier this year, China's internet regulator informed LinkedIn that it needed to better regulate its content and gave the service 30 days to make changes, the Wall Street Journal reported. LinkedIn will replace its localized platform in China with a new app called InJobs that has some of LinkedIn's career networking features but will not include a social feed or the ability to share posts or articles. According to CBS News, other tech giants that have cut back business in China include Google, which pulled back from mainland China in 2010, and Twitter, of course, which is officially banned. Number 3. Walgreens says it will close 5 stores in San Francisco next month, citing what it described as a continuing problem of organized shoplifting in the city. According to the New York Times, Walgreens said its San Francisco stores had been targeted by professional thieves who resell the goods they steal immediately, mainly through online marketplace. The San Francisco Chronicle has reported that law enforcement officials have attributed much of the city's retail crime to organized theft rings. In one instance, get this, I think a lot of us have seen this online, a security guard and a TV reporter were recording a man, but the thief was undeterred, raiding a Walgreens store on a bicycle, a garbage bag in hand filled with stolen merchandise. Millions have watched this video. Now remember that California's Proposition 47, which voters passed in 2014, lowered criminal sentences for certain nonviolent crimes like shoplifting and check forgery, and authorities believe it's being exploited by those who want to commit theft. You think?
Yeah.
You think? The initiative set a threshold of only $950 for shoplifting to be considered a misdemeanor, which doesn't prompt law enforcement to make any arrests, rather than a felony which could incur harsh penalties like jail time. It was at least the 5th time that the man who was later arrested on a raft of burglary and theft charges had targeted that particular store.
Yeah, it's free. Because no one's going to prosecute.
And number 4. Pens play at the Florida Panthers tonight, and which will be the Panthers season opener. The Pens will probably still be feeling good after dominating the 2-time defenders, Tampa Bay Lightning, Tuesday night. Final score was 6-2. Puck drop tonight at 7 p.m. Oh, in case you have not been following along, Patrick Hornqvist is now a Panther.
Very nice.
That's your top 4 at 4. So Horny's looking to take on his former team, I read today, in, I believe it was the Trib. He said he's looking forward to the contest, and he's a favorite pen of mine.
Of course he is.
Was he a favorite pen of yours?
He was. I have his jersey.
Do you? Oh, see, I don't have his jersey. That's an extra step.
That's a big step.
Okay, so are you sad to see Horny on the other side?
Yes.
Yeah, I know.
When's the home opener? Is it Saturday?
I don't know when it is. It's a good question.
I think it might be Saturday, yeah.
It's got to be coming up very soon.
Sure it does, yeah. Will you go to a game this year?
Heck, yes.
Christy?
If I can afford it.
Hey, you can do those, that cheapy thing.
Listen, you know that cheapy thing?
No.
Oh.
That's because we don't remember what it's called right now. You know that cheapy thing?
Oh, the cheapy thing. Like the last minute, you get tickets.
Yeah.
You got to tell me about this.
Okay, we'll tell you about it. If we
can remember.
If we can remember what it's called.
I'm too
It's
concerned
on my
about
phone.
my mouth.
I'll look it up.
All right.
Yeah, multiple times I have gone to games, like seriously,
Yeah.
like we're finishing the show and I'm like, okay, I'm going to the game.
$6.
Yeah.
Something like that. Well, not
Yeah.
really, but
No, probably not
maybe
$6.
$20.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Don't get people excited about 6. That's not going to happen. Anyway, all right. Coming
come
up.
back?
Yeah, we're going to
Beautiful
take a
night
break. So we'll talk about the moon, Jupiter, and Saturn with Ralph Cruz, science writer and content creator for his own Curious channel. Isn't that something? We're going to be talking science in just a couple of minutes with Ralph Crew. Before we do that, though, article in the Wall Street Journal that kind of made you and I sit up and take notice. At-home exercise injuries are skyrocketing. Here's how to stay safe. So the article talks about the fact that since the pandemic started, a lot of people started not obviously being able to go to a gym, and so they started working out at home.
You see those Peloton ads have been running nonstop.
Exactly.
Which is very pricey.
No kidding. Over $2,000.
Shoot.
But not everybody's buying a Peloton. People are doing all sorts of different things, but there have been a lot of exercise injuries.
Really?
Since people have been doing that.
On the treadmill or whatever.
Exactly, right?
I mean, I can say you could get hurt on your treadmill. That thing gets away from you.
Oh, of course. Are you kidding me? So emergency room visits that are exercise related increased by more than 48% from the year before. Yeah. They said treadmills and stationary bikes accounted for a combined 37% of all injuries, but even push-ups and stretching made the list. So, to combat that, the Wall Street Journal has put together a bunch of exercise experts who've weighed in on how to stay safe at home.
Really? Okay, now, so have you yourself been injured?
Only once. So I started working out in the second day of this year, and I got injured one time.
Doing what?
Doing a particular move with weights.
Oh, weights.
And I pulled a muscle in my ab, and it hurt like...
Really?
It hurt like mad.
Were you doing like curls or something?
No, it was like a sit-up thing. It was like you hold weights ahead of you and then sit up. And I ripped a muscle. I mean, I felt like I got a gunshot.
No kidding.
Mm-hmm. I didn't go to see anybody because, of course, it was COVID, which is what they're talking about in the article. They're saying everybody did what I did. Now, there's nothing that could have been done about mine. It's not like I, hurt my arm or blew out my ankle or something like that.
When you healed, did you go back to the routine?
I have not done that one. I have not done that one move ever since. I'm not doing it.
Right.
I'm not doing it because every once in a while it still hurts, and it's been 5 months.
Right.
Anyway, so you want to hear what the Wall Street Journal is recommending?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, now these are common sense, but I think a lot of them people just forget. So the first one is don't forget to warm up. Right? So especially if you have a job like we have where you sit a lot, you look at your computer, you're looking at your phone or whatever, your muscles are not in a state where they're ready to exercise. So you cannot go from sitting like this or from laying in your bed in the morning to popping out of bed and doing like some high intensity workout.
Right.
It just doesn't work that way. So 5 to 10 minutes of low intensity cardio is what they recommend to warm up.
What would that be?
So that would be like, jogging in place, or that would be something that,
Walking briskly.
Or doing walkouts or something like that. Jumping rope, maybe.
Warm up a little bit.
Yeah, something like that.
Out.
Okay. This, I think, is really important. Vary your workouts. So a lot of the problems they talk about in this article are because the only thing somebody does is work on a bike, or the only thing they do is walk, or the only thing. And so you're getting a really good workout on those same muscles, but the other muscles aren't really doing anything.
Right.
And you're putting a lot of stress on the ones that are working every day. Right. So they say, so do something different. So walk someday, maybe you run another day, maybe you do push-ups one day, you do a workout that incorporates a whole different part of your body each time so that you're not. I did step aerobics for years. That was a total mistake.
Why?
Because all I did was, I hurt my knees because I did was, I did that for years.
Was that like a little,
Yeah.
stool you were jumping?
All I did was like stand. That's just a really, really bad idea. So, vary your workouts. Okay. The next thing is learn proper technique. This is where I screwed up and how I got injured. Is that I didn't look at the video more closely. I didn't watch it before I did it. You know what I mean? So you're learning a new move, and you should watch your trainer if you're doing it online and see how they're doing it, instead of just listening to them and saying, "Oh, I'm sure I got
can
that.
do that. That looks pretty easy."
How hard is it to sit up with a weight?
Right.
It's no big deal. It's a big deal.
Ouch.
And so I got injured because I did it wrong. So learn proper technique. The last thing is set up your space for success. The Wall Street Journal says that 40% of the people who were injured, who ended up in the emergency room, were injured because something was in the way of what they were doing, like a laundry basket, right?
A vacuum cleaner.
Or a set of shoes, or kids' toys, or something like that. The fewer the obstacles, the less likely your chance of injury, and the more likely you are to max out your workout.
Yeah.
Can you imagine
All good
going into
advice.
an ER because you were doing like a high intensity workout and you tripped on a Lego or something?
I'm sure, yeah.
Well, look at how many times it happens.
Right. Yeah. I have not worked out.
Well, you had a car accident.
Yeah.
You're a little limited in that regard.
Right. So I just kind of like, but the weird thing is you fall out of the habit and then you go, it seems like an insurmountable. I go,
It seems like I
don't
don't
think
really
I can do
wanna
that
do
right now.
that.
I don't want to,
Right.
But
it's,
it
it's
feels,
like anything else, though. If you look at it like I'm just going to do it today,
right.
you don't have to say I'm going to do this forever. You just say, well, just today I'll do it, and then tomorrow you're going to make.
I'll do this again.
You're
today.
you're going to make your own choice tomorrow,
Right.
but just you're going to make your choice for today.
Yeah.
And then-
Yeah. So do you continue to work out?
Yep.
Really? Mm-hmm. And do you feel better?
Oh my gosh.
Really?
For sure.
Stronger?
My cardio capacity
What?
has, I bet, quadrupled.
Really?
Oh my gosh. When I look at what I could do when I started and what I can do now and the length I can do it in, it's real. And I'm 53 years old. It's not like I'm Christy at 27.
Right. Would you join a gym
No.
because of the
For it's
expense
too
or the hassle?
expensive. And I think you waste too much time going back and forth.
Yeah, there is that. But,
Depends. Some people like that motivation.
right.
I'm, kind of an introvert and I don't want to be exercising in front of anybody else.
No judgment zone.
No. Right. There's no judgment zone. It's just me and my two cats.
Right. I guess.
That's the way I like it.
I don't know. I mean, we're going to get close to the end of the year here, and everyone's going. I think COVID's been so bad for people just because, just kind of hanging out, right? I have not.
And it made me nervous to do a lot of things.
What do you mean?
COVID in general.
Right.
It made me just nervous. Period. And so I was reluctant to start new things, no matter what they were.
But there you go.
So start a new thing.
All right.
If I
take a
can
break?
listen, if I can do it, you guys can do it.
All right. Yeah, you look good.
Thanks.
All right, pleasure. Mm-hmm. Should we take a break?
I think we should.
Oh, we talk. Okay.
Okay. All right. We'll see what's coming up next.
All right.
The Ride Home with John and Kathy,
All right.
Thursday edition.
I got to run down the hall.
I remember
Okay.
being a little kid.
Yeah.
And my dad told me, maybe second grade, that he was making a big purchase. So to me in second grade, like a big purchase was like a big book. Or like my parents just didn't buy stuff when I was a little kid, right?
Right.
And so like we didn't buy cars or like big but there just wasn't a lot of
Big purchase.
purchasing when I was little.
Yeah.
And so in my mind, all I could think of is I remembered that I had seen these like new kind of like the boom box.
Oh, yeah.
Like the big, and all I could think of is, since my dad loved music, that maybe that's what it was.
We're going to get a big radio.
Anyway, he came in with the telescope.
Oh,
And I was like, why would we want that?
yeah.
How is that possibly going to benefit the family?
So you got a telescope.
So we got a telescope when I was in second grade.
And you used it?
Oh yeah, we used it all the time. And
Really?
then I certainly grew to appreciate it a lot.
Yeah.
And that's just how I kind of started out dipping my toe into, the very, very, very
Basics.
basics of astronomy.
So your father was an amateur astronomer
Right.
of some sort,
Yeah.
right? He could point the telescope towards the moon or towards, the North Star
Right.
and find his way around the heavens.
Right. And so the telescope sat in our family room next to the Zenith console TV.
Nice.
And then we'd just, take it out and use it.
What happened to it?
I don't know, but we had it for a good 10 years.
Excellent.
What about you?
Well, my youngest boy, is like obsessed with astronomy. He always has been. And so he's got probably 4 massive telescopes. We belong to AAAP, the Amateur Astronomy Association of Pittsburgh. And you go out and there's all these guys with these computerized telescopes. I'm sure, not my boy, but some of these guys are spending 10, 20, thousands of dollars on these incredibly beautiful, sensitive instruments. And they're happy to show you the stars. It's a great family night. So with that in mind, the nights have been so beautiful. Ralph Cruz with us. And Ralph, he is a science writer, a content creator for various outlets, including Universe Today, Practical Engineering, SciShow, and his own Curious channel. It's on YouTube called Isn't That Something? Hey, Ralph, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me back. Always a pleasure.
Sure. Okay, Ralph. So let's talk about, when I was a little kid, the very first thing that I saw through my dad's telescope was the moon.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I remember it was the first thing, and it was like, the thing I remember about it was its color. Like, to me, the moon was always like white. You know what I mean? But I saw it through the telescope, and I saw something different. So let's start with the moon. So were you looking at the night sky? What are you seeing?
Well, the moon is up tonight, and it is in a waxing gibbous phase, which is probably at least my second favorite moon phase. But looking through a telescope, you'll see all sorts of details that you might miss when you look at it with the unaided eye. With the unaided eye, the moon looks really kind of flat, almost like a two-dimensional disk.
Yeah.
But when you look at it through a telescope, you really start to see that this is a landscape. This is another world. You can see craters and even some mountain ranges. You see shadows of those mountains cast across the lunar highlands, and it really brings the whole thing to life in a way that is, it's striking. In many ways, we're all so familiar with the moon, but it might be my favorite astronomical target of the entire night sky.
Really?
There's just something really special. It looks like another world, and that's because, of course, it is. It's 250,000 miles away and has its own landscape and features, and it's striking. It's also, you mentioned the color, and one of the things that I found most surprising when I first got into science communication, I actually got to handle some pieces of the moon, which, blew my mind.
Wait.
But they are about the...
How did that happen?
Yeah, Ralph, really? Wait.
Yeah, well...
Not many people have held the moon.
No. Well, I spent about 10 years working at the Science Center here in Pittsburgh, and when we would have special events, NASA would send us small pieces of the moon. They're encased in some sort of lucite or some sort of clear acrylic so that you don't, damage these pieces. But these are samples brought back by the Apollo missions, and I've held a piece of the moon in my hand,
That is so
Wow.
cool.
which is just, how cool is that, right? But
Super
it's also, it's not white. The moon is about the color of a parking lot. It's actually a lot darker
Really?
than most of, yeah, it is. It looks white only because of the contrast between the bright sunlit moon surface and the dark darkness of the night sky, right? The night is a very, very dark. The empty sky is near black, and so compared to that, the moon produces so much light that it sort of blows out our eyes in a way, and we see it as this brilliant light source, and so it looks sort of whitish. But in fact, if you were to go to the moon, it would look like the color of a relatively freshly paved parking lot. It's pretty dark. Yeah.
That's surprising. I had no idea.
I didn't either.
Okay, so Ralph, so the moon, you say it's in the waxing phase right now?
Yes, and so waxing just means that the illuminated portion of the moon is growing at the moment. So we're sort of on the way to a full moon. So in about a week, we'll see a full moon.
I see.
And then once it passes that, it enters the waning phase. So it waxes as it gets bigger. Although, I mean, of course, the moon itself isn't changing size. Just the lit portion of it that we see gets bigger when it's waxing and gets smaller when it is waning. And right now, tonight and tomorrow, the moon is very near the two easiest to see gas giant planets of Jupiter and Saturn. And it's a beautiful show. As soon as the sun goes down, you can't miss it. You'll see the moon, of course. And then tonight it'll be very nearby Saturn, which will look like a star-like point nearby. And then to the left of that, you'll see Jupiter, which is actually brighter than any of the stars in the night sky. So you get to see three really great celestial objects, all sort of in the same neighborhood of the sky.
Oh, that's so cool. Okay, so I'm glad you bring up Saturn, because one of the thrills of my life, I think before you came on, I was talking to my son who has a fairly sophisticated telescope, and the first time you pointed towards Saturn and you actually see the rings around Saturn, it is just incredibly thrilling. Now, I'm sure you've seen this, so we have an opportunity tonight, perhaps, if the sky would clear, to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Even a low-powered backyard telescope can easily resolve the rings of Saturn. And if you've never seen it, I highly recommend it. I've shown thousands of people Saturn through all sorts of telescopes, big and small. And there's just something special. The rings of Saturn are probably the object in the night sky that has created more astronomers than anything else. This is where so many people get the bug. When you see that, you're like, whoa. It's real. Yeah. And, we've all seen pictures, but seeing it when the light that is hitting your eyeball actually was at Saturn an hour and a half ago.
Yeah.
And it's like crazy. That's like the last thing that light touched before it hit you in the eye was the planet Saturn. That's special. That's pretty amazing.
Ralph Cruz with us, science writer and content creator for various outlets, including Universe Today, Practical Engineering, and his own Curious channel. Isn't that something? Ralph, talk to us about why Jupiter is the brightest thing in the sky.
So Jupiter is far brighter than any of the other stars, and the reason for that is a couple things. Jupiter is very big. You may have heard.
Yes,
it's the largest planet in the solar system, and it's relatively nearby. The Jupiter, relatively speaking, this is still astronomy. It's about 500 million miles away, but that's twice as close as Saturn. And it is covered in clouds, and these clouds, like the clouds here on Earth, are very reflective. So it has what we call a high albedo. Just means that it's very reflective of light, much more reflective than the moon is. And so because it's very reflective and it's relatively nearby and it's large, we see it with a greater intensity or magnitude of illumination than any of the stars in the nighttime sky. Although there is one planet that sometimes beats it. Not all the time, but sometimes the planet Venus will be brighter than Jupiter. Yeah, but you'll only ever see Venus right after sunset or right before sunrise. You'll never see it in the middle of the night. So if it's sort of the middle of the night and you see a very, very bright planet in the sky, you can be sure that is our old friend Jupiter.
I can't believe Jupiter is twice as close to us as Saturn is.
Yeah, the solar system is very big, and the outer planets are spread apart quite a bit more than the inner planets. The inner planets are all relatively tightly packed, only a few dozen millions of miles apart. But when we get to the outer solar system, we're talking on the scale of billions of miles.
Interesting.
And even with that said, the solar system is very small compared to the solar system. The stars are unbelievably, you could say astronomically far away, right? Like I said, light takes an hour and a half to get from Saturn to here. Well, the closest star sends light here, and it still takes about 4.1 years So that kind of gives you a perspective of just the incredible distance and scale of outer space. And that's the closest star. We're not talking like an average star or a really impressively far away star. That's our nearest neighbor.
Wow.
And it still takes, at the speed of light, takes over 4 years to get from there to here.
I love this. Ralph, talk about, as the seasons change, then our view of the heavens change too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as the Earth is orbiting the sun, the part of the sky that the sun is in is sort of blocked out. The only thing we see is the sun at that time. And we call that time period the day. But at night, of course, the sun's not in the way. And you can think of it like if the part of the Earth facing the sun was sort of like looking forward behind us, that dark portion of the stars. And the stars are so incredibly far away that our movement around the sun makes no impact whatsoever, at least not to the visible eye, to the just to the human eye. With instruments, you can actually measure it, but the pattern of the very distant stars stays the same. So from our perspective, you could say that the sun seems to move through the constellations. This is, in fact, where your horoscope, zodiac sign comes from. It's where the sun is, like what constellation the sun is in. Okay. And you can imagine on the opposite side of the sky from that is the part of the sky that we would see. So in the winter time, for instance, you'll see the famous constellation of Orion, the hunter, his famous belt of 3 stars. That's only really visible in the evening during the winter. If you were to try and look for it tonight, you'd have to stay up until the wee hours of the morning for the Earth to be sort of pointed in that direction. And similarly, in the summertime, the constellations of, say, Sagittarius and Scorpius are visible, but in the winter, you would never see them. So the background stars change, but it's about our perspective. It's about our relationship with the sun and how much of the sky that's blocking. Those stars are there the entire time. And that, I think, also helps to build a picture of our place in space that I don't know, sort of acknowledges just the grand scale of, and these are just the nearby stars in the Milky Way. Of course, the Milky Way has hundreds of billions of stars in it, and we can only see a tiny, tiny portion of those with the unaided eye. But
wow. Ralph, sorry we have to cut you off because it's radio and time is a wasting. But thank you so much because this time was not wasted. I can't believe that Saturn is that much further away from us than Jupiter. It just blew my mind a little.
You need a telescope to check it out.
Check it out.
Yeah.
All right, that's Ralph Crew. Ralph's a science writer. Check out his own Curious channel on YouTube. Isn't that something? I bet you learned something. Coming up next, our good friend Karen Swallow.
Have you ever played Dungeons and Dragons? You know what that is?
Yeah, I watched Stranger Things,
Okay,
but
right.
I've never played the game.
I mean, my kids play it for hours on end,
Yeah.
and it's role playing and creating a completely fantasy world. I mean,
Right.
everything is manufactured in the mind. You're sharing it with the group. You take on the persona of this personality that you have created.
Okay, that's really funny that you're describing it that way, because you know what that sounds like to me?
What?
It doesn't sound like a board game. It sounds like how some of us are interacting online.
Oh, I think a lot of people
So like
believe that that's true.
they go on social media, and instead of being themselves, they become a character.
Right.
They become a character who's angrier or who's super offended or some kind of like
A funny cat.
or a warrior for a cause.
Oh, yeah. I think that's very common. I think a lot of people do that in today's world. Well, Karen Swallow Prior is back with us. Karen's been a regular guest on our show throughout the years. And she wrote a piece at Religion News Service, Cosplay Christianity. The sin is in the denial of the life that God calls us to. Hey, Karen, welcome back to the show. How you doing?
Good to be with you guys. Doing great.
Yeah, good to hear from you, Karen. Okay, so, I mean, there's so many things we could talk about in the world right now, and I'd love to hear more about your dogs and everything. But I am going to stick to this topic, which is, cosplay in your way of looking at things is not just like men dressing up as like the Braveheart guy or like a Civil War reenactor, right? It's not just that. It goes deeper into us not being satisfied with our current life, right? So explain that to us.
Yeah, well, I mean, I became aware. By the way, I did play Dungeons and Dragons
can't
when I was
believe it.
in high school,
Okay.
which was a long time ago. But I have to tell you the truth. I only played a few times, and I realized how people were, even in high school, what people were really getting into this and just really into their personas, and I just couldn't abide by that. That creeps me out. So I didn't play very much, and I guess maybe that was a formative experience for me, because when I got introduced to cosplay many years later, through students and through culture, apparently 50 Shades of Grey had a lot to do with it. It just, I know there are many different levels and layers and nuances, but it just comes back, as you said, Kathy, to this: why do grown people have to pretend and play and not be who they are, which also includes even different ways on social media.
So when you're thinking about the worst parts of Twitter or Facebook, where people just are unbelievably aggressive, and Karen, we've known you long enough to know that you've been the subject of a lot of that, and I'm only laughing because it hurts, not because it's funny. But so we see, and I look at those people, and I think they're so aggressive online. Are they like that in real life, or are they kind of doing this? Are they playing a part? Are they kind of like living as their dream warrior or something when they get online?
I mean, I think that's probably true in a lot of cases. I certainly hope that those people are not that way in real life. But even if they are, it's still an incomplete picture. So there's still just sort of this hardened role that comes into play. And then some of the worst offenders are the anonymous accounts, which really is role playing. I mean, it's hiding behind, a pseudonym, or hiding behind, clearly a fake name. And I've interacted with some of those people, and they've just told me that they can't really say the things that they say without compromising, their job security or whatever. And that's just not a way of living with integrity.
So they're not willing to put themselves on the line.
Exactly. So if they can't express what they believe to be truth as part of their personhood and part of their, their whole being, then how true is it?
Right. So that's in some ways like cosplay Christianity, right? There's a veneer there. The real person's behind that. A lot of people were just kind of faking it.
Well, that's exactly it. I mean, of course, I've gotten some feedback from this article from some of the people who are in the cosplay community, and they
they're
feel a little
offended.
hurt
Let me guess,
and a
they're
little
upset by it.
defensive. And well, they're actually been very kind about it, and so it's been a good interaction. But that's not my real concern. I talked about that in the article to explain what the term means. But when it comes to Christians who are doing this, who are doing this performative kind of interaction on social media or at riots and rallies, or even I mean, it's just the term that I used a few weeks ago, which inspired the article, was when a pastor got on YouTube. It had to be removed and was encouraging people to make fake vaccine cards because of their fear of losing their jobs. Now, there may be a few people who are in legitimate situations where that's an ethical dilemma, but as far as like pretending that, in America, Christians are being persecuted because they don't want to get vaccines, to me, that's role playing.
Right. So real maturity and real, psychological health comes from recognizing when you're doing it. Because I think a lot of these people, like you said, this particular pastor who's talking about, faking vaccine cards, I bet he would not say that he is cosplaying Christianity. I think he would say, no, I'm actually doing something important. It's your analysis of him that says, no, I don't think that that's what that is.
Oh, certainly. I mean, he would disagree with me. We even had a little back and forth, and he thinks this is a real danger and a real risk to the people in his congregation and community. But then why is it being posted on YouTube? That's not really how you pastor individual people who are under your shepherding.
Right.
So it does become, social media is part of amplifying this kind of role playing, and we're probably all guilty of it in some way or another, or at least vulnerable to being pulled into it. And so it's a little bit of an inflammatory term and sort of a polemical article, but I really do want us to be thinking more carefully about these things.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. So the pastor knowingly, I mean, he is breaking the law to some degree, is he not? I mean, to think that he's advising his parishioners to engage in fraudulent behavior.
Well, I believe that's why the video got pulled off of YouTube. And again, we hear a lot of this persecution and martyrdom language, which is, again, it's playing a role that really does exist and has existed throughout Christian history. But that is not our place to just adopt that language and adopt that posture as though what we're going through in this country in the 21st century America is like what the martyrs have gone through throughout history and are going through in various places around the world. That really demeans what real persecution.
Right. I mean, our luxury of us being Christians here in America in the 21st century, I mean, pales in comparison to what you're describing, right? I mean, you just read a little bit of history or even read your Bible or look at the news today, and you see people being killed for their faith.
Exactly. And of course, I think we all would agree that we are increasingly facing a post-Christian culture in America, and it's less and less Christian, and hostility towards Christianity is growing. But that's still very different from the kinds of things that we're talking about, and we can still use our freedom and still express our Christianity in such a way so that hopefully we can prevent that from happening. But if we just erase all the nuances and distinctions and call it all persecution, that we're contributing to our own loss.
Right. Now, the reason anyone does cosplay in the first place is because it's fun to be somebody else, right? And I'm not saying in the instance of, the American church wishing that they were persecuted, that it would be fun to be persecuted. That's not the case, but I do think there's a little bit of a link because I think it just imbues our current time or a person's current position with an additional level of importance.
Importance and drama. I think that we are so used to being stimulated and excited and dramatic in so many ways that we've lost the joy and the pleasure of an ordinary life and just being good Christians in our families and neighborhoods and communities and spreading the gospel through quiet faithfulness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
An ordinary life.
That's so
that
true.
Sounds pretty good.
Listen, Karen, we only have a couple seconds left. I just want to say you're doing a terrific job online, John.
Always.
We're always
100%.
we're always behind you, Karen.
You're an excellent model.
Are you liking your new digs at Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary?
Oh, absolutely. It's been such a wonderful, refreshing change.
Great.
And I love the students there, and I'm just thankful to be in that place.
Great. And how are your dogs?
One is sleeping right next to me right now, getting her belly rubbed. So
Very
she's
good.
pretty good. They're all good.
And you're writing.
Thanks, guys.
Are you writing a new book?
I am. I am working on a book with the working title, The Evangelical Imagination. It will be done in a year and out in 2023, which seems like a long ways away, but that's going to go by quickly for me as I write it.
Okay, terrific. We're excited about it, Karen.
Can't wait to talk to you guys about it.
All right, Karen. Take care. Talk soon.
Always a
Thanks.
pleasure.
You too. Bye-bye.
Karen Swallow Prior, easily found on Facebook, on Twitter, Religion News Service, you name it. Google her name, and you'll find a lot of interesting things to engage in. Karen Swallow Prior. Do you know the artist Banksy?
Yeah, that's not my thing.
Okay, well,
Is that your thing?
I find it interesting. It's
Okay.
performance art in
Right.
some way, okay? So Banksy, you may have seen his images. They're very simple images oftentimes. He's a provocateur. 3 years ago.
In the art world.
In the art world, yeah. 3 years ago, he had a painting, very simple. It was sort of like a black and white image of a little girl, and she was a balloon was kind of floating away from her. And this was being auctioned off at the auction house Sotheby's. And it was in a gilded golden frame. and someone bought this piece for $1.8 million. And as soon as the gavel went down, the gilded frame started to churn, and the piece of artwork started to move down out of the frame, and the bottom part of the frame revealed that the artwork was being shredded, like little thin strips of shredding. And it was fabulous because all these, art, I would say snobs in some way, but they were like, "Oh my God, oh no!" It was so cool. It was like Banksy pranked the art world. So that unto itself became this sort of art world sensation.
And of course, the idea behind it, which is that art is bought and sold, and so I'm guessing, I have never talked to Banksy, but I'm assuming that he kind of meant that once something goes for that much money, you've kind of shredded the artistic value of it.
Exactly. Well, yesterday, Sotheby's resold that piece. It's only halfway in the frame, and it's shredded for $25.4 million. So that person who bought it for $1.8 million resold it for $25.4. I mean, and again, that's the world of the uber rich, that they can throw money at something that is, like you say, disposable, beauty in the eye of the beholder. What does it really mean? It doesn't mean much, but someone with the cash goes, I'm going to buy that because it's cool to own. I own a weird Banksy. I don't know. Go figure. Hey, good afternoon. Thanks for coming along today for the Thursday edition of The Ride Home. We are on YouTube.
I'm waving. Do you see it? I was waving. Would you wave?
Yeah, okay. Waving
Yeah,
too.
okay.
You can see us.
Sean never waves.
I don't.
He's-
Because I know that you're on the radio. You can imagine me waving, right? I'm waving furiously right now.
Okay.
Actually, I'm not. But
a
it's
lie.
in your mind eye. If I say it, I'm waving furiously. Then it's because it's radio, right? All right. Listen, I saw this survey today, which is not a surprise, but in some ways kind of a heartbreaker as well. The 2021 American Family Survey has revealed this: that 45% of Americans agree that society is better off when more people are married. Now, according to the summary report in this survey, the 45% figure is the lowest percentage of people who think society is better off when more people are married in the survey's history. By comparison, in 2017, 56%
Wow,
of
that's a
respondents.
pretty big drop.
Yeah, The survey indicates that the number of people who believe marriage is needed to create strong families, 52%, has declined by 10 percentage points since 2015. When asked if they think marriage is old-fashioned and out of date, 19% of respondents said they agree. In 2015, 12% said that. So more people are saying meh to marriage, which is no surprise, right?
Why do you think that is?
I think because
I'm not asking you to be a cultural. I guess I am asking you to be a cultural prognosticator or interpreter.
I think marriage has become increasingly out of the norm, right? It's revolutionary, I think, in many ways to be married today, to be married and to stay married for decades. What's interesting is we love to celebrate. You see people who are married 50, 60 years, 70 years, some people fabulous. That's incredibly revolutionary. The norm today is people either hooking up, not getting married, or perhaps just living together, and that's okay too, right? And people, living together as partners with children and see no necessity or need. This is just good enough. It's okay. We're married, to each other in our mind's eye in some way.
But we don't need we don't need a piece of paper
We don't certainly need the state, and certainly not the church,
to tell us
make
what
our
to do.
marriages holy.
I suspect that part of it has to do with young people seeing really bad marriages.
Oh, I'm sure that's true.
A lot of people have just done marriage badly, and marriage is hard to do. I'm not trying to point the finger, because it's a very difficult association, as we've said over the years.
Anyone who's been married for any length of time, you know how difficult it is to navigate it. It's not a bed of roses all the time.
Right. But seeing people horribly handle marriage horribly can scar any kid, every kid.
Right.
Every kid, right? And so you think, okay, so and also I think media-wise, and we're not a show that just goes after the media all the time and says that they're,
we love
right. Believe me, we love media, but there is there's a persistent story that's been told over the last 2 decades on TV, which is that you should live together. That no one goes from dating to getting married. If they do get married on most TV shows, they live together first.
Right.
That's just what it's been. Now, interestingly enough, this is anecdotal. This is not an official survey. This doesn't come from Barna or Pew or anybody that does surveys. I'm just saying all of the people that I know who have lived together first have not stayed married. They have married and then divorced.
Right. That's
so it's not. So what I'm saying is living together is not a guarantee of marital success.
No, I think the percentage. You're right about that, right? I don't know what those numbers are,
but that's why a lot of people go into living together, is because they think we want to be sure first.
Test things out.
Right, but it doesn't often pan out that way.
Right. I just think it's easy to live together, isn't it?
I don't know. I don't think it's
no.
easy.
No, I'm just saying.
Oh,
want to live together?
Oh, to just be able to say yes.
Well,
oh,
yeah,
right.
we're moving
Yeah,
in.
yeah.
Hey, we're moving in.
Yeah.
Oh, congratulations, you guys are living together. It's a whole other matter to say we're going to get married and then, go through the whole process.
Yeah. All right, let's bring Christy Stockdale into the conversation. She's our producer on the other side, in the other room. Christy,
on the hot seat.
On the hot seat, 27 years old. Talk about people your age. How do you think they look at marriage?
It's not needed. I mean, like you guys said, we can just live together, do everything. What's the point? We can still hang out with our friends, do whatever.
Believers and non-believers?
Yeah.
That's surprising.
What about people you know who have gotten married? Why have they?
It depends on if they're a believer or not a believer.
Okay, so talk about people who aren't believers.
If they do get married, it's just because that's like the norm. That's
traditional.
That's the thing you do.
Okay.
If you're a Christian, that's, I mean,
Yeah, we know that,
yeah,
right? It's what.
that's what we do.
I mean, would
Yeah.
you feel pressure? Do you feel pressure?
To be married?
Yeah.
Yes.
And not to live with someone. If you would meet someone and the guy would say, "I love you. Let's just live together." Would you feel pressure because you were a believer that the proper thing to do is to get married?
I wouldn't date somebody that doesn't have the same beliefs as me. So I
wouldn't
don't
get into that
yeah, I wouldn't be in that
Okay,
situation.
that's good. All right, that's good to know.
Yeah. Okay. What about? Okay, one more question for you.
On the hot seat.
On the hot seat. So if you talk about how you and your friends talk about being married. So you have friends, I'm sure, who are believers in Jesus and those who aren't.
Mm-hmm.
So do you talk about getting married? How do you navigate those different perspectives on marriage?
Yeah, so most of my friends are married, and it's mostly all Christians that I hang out with. I have kind of gotten away from some of my non-Christian friends over the last year or so, but we talk about it. Like people almost give me advice, I think.
Okay.
And because like I'm the single one, I'm like the sixth wheel.
What, you
of,
said
right.
to be fixed.
Yeah. So it's like, well, this is what you could do, or it's like, hey, if you ever get in this situation, this is how we handled it.
Right.
So
Okay.
I mean, so as a young woman dating, the norm is you're just going to hook up, and the idea of living together or marriage, that's not even considered.
yeah.
That's the norm.
Okay, one more. So I said that I didn't have any more questions, but I have one more. Only
hot seat.
because this is something that's been a subject that we've discussed a lot at our church over the last, I would say, decade, is that I think prior to the last decade, we often did not honor singleness as every bit as valid as being married. And so I think inadvertently we made people who were not married feel somehow less than. Like they're just waiting around to be married and really don't have any other function.
Right.
And for maybe it was more than 10 years, I would say. But anyway, this is just something that our church is focused on and saying, wait a minute, no. What are we doing? Like this isn't a marriage factory. We're trying to encourage each other, whether we're married or whether we're single, to pursue Christ and to live in ways that are honorable and energetic and impact the world.
Yeah, but you do know that that's a large part of the Christian culture, right? Is to be married. Heck, we're running spots on the air right now that talk about getting married in a year.
Sure.
Right. I mean,
Right.
there is something to do with the marriage factory of being a believer.
there is. But I guess my question for you is: have you sensed that in any of your church communities that you've been in, that you feel like
Less than.
you're less than, or you're not valued as much because you're not married yet?
Yes.
Okay.
You're smiling big because
Yeah.
obviously you feel this.
I have. I don't want to say it on the air.
Yeah.
But yes, it's a big thing, and it was very much pressured onto me, not by my parents, but by the church community.
Okay. See, I think that's something that we should talk about more. There is nothing in Paul says it's better not to be married.
Right.
That's what he says. It's better not to be married. So somehow in the church today, I think in our efforts to promote marriage as a good thing, we've turned it around and said it's better to be married.
Well, yeah, but given your choice, you want to love someone and be with that person.
But what did the scripture? Paul says it is better to not be married. So if that's what he said, that's what the Bible's telling us, then we have to honor that. We have to honor singleness as every bit the same valued lifestyle as a married lifestyle is.
I mean, I get that, but at the same time, I don't think Christy's thinking, okay, Paul. I mean, I don't want to speak for you, but I think most people. I'm not saying most.
I don't know if
I
that's the
I
case.
think so. I do. I believe that's true.
I don't know if that's the case.
I'd say the majority of people, especially younger people, would prefer to have a partner. Life is better with a partner.
Well, what does that say to somebody who's 65 and never
I
married?
don't know. I don't know what that says.
Well, I feel like it says to them that their choices are less than, and that they should wish for something different.
Speaking
than
in
they
very
have.
broad general
Yeah,
terms,
sure.
here, right?
Sure.
I mean, life is about coupling up in some way.
I don't think it should be.
Well, that's a question and a conversation that has deeper roots elsewhere than we have time for in these. How are you with the Ten Commandments, Karen? How you doing with that?
Not well, John. I seem to violate them.
I'm surprised because I thought you might say, "I got this."
Yeah. Oh, I'm just so good.
Ten
with
Commandments.
I'm
Yeah,
good with the top 10, you guys. No problem.
Tyler Edwards is back with us. Tyler's an author. He's also the discipleship pastor of Carolina Forest Community Church in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. He's the author of 2 books. We'll talk about that as the conversation goes on. But Tyler, you wrote a piece, "What I Got Wrong About the Ten Commandments." Now, as a pastor, I would think that you'd say, "I got it. I got all 10. I'm okay."
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but
me too.
you say you haven't killed anybody.
No.
So that's good.
Yet.
That's off to a good. If that's the bar we're setting.
Well, okay, that's the bar.
Well.
That's the bar I set.
Fairly
so.
low bar there, Tyler.
Yeah.
All right, so I have a friend who I've talked to about Jesus for a long time, and he always says when we talk about the 10 Commandments or something like that, he says, "Well, I think I'm a pretty good person. I'm a pretty good person. I haven't killed anybody or anything." So so we're laughing about it, but I think that's how a lot of people outside the church think. Well,
Right. We compare ourselves to the lowest common denominator, right? We
Right.
said this is the worst possible case, and so long as I'm better than that, I'm doing pretty well, as if goodness is a zero-sum game. But that's not really the standard that Jesus lays out in the Gospels, and that tends to be where we get ourselves in trouble. We compare, but we always compare down, not up.
Right. Okay. But in your piece, you write about this. You say, but in my mind's eye, in many ways, I get angry and I think things that are untoward or absolutely heinous. Right. So Jesus would say, your anger, in that anger, you're killing somebody.
Yeah. And so, I mean, even though you get into the complication of actual and sort of the implications, but what I kind of think he's addressing a lot of times is there's the impurity, the sin that exists internally. And just because we don't always act on that sin doesn't mean that we're not guilty of having that sinfulness inside us and those desires and those things, which is the revelation of what's wrong with us and what's broken in our hearts. And so basically, whenever you see these, like a lot of times people go like, oh, Old Testament was hard, New Testament's all grace and love. Well, Jesus reiterates a lot of the commands of the Old Testament, but in the New Testament, he makes them even more difficult to follow because it's not just about behavior, it's about attitude, motivation, and heart.
Right. So the difference between you've heard it said and then him saying, but I say. So you've heard it say, well, you're not supposed. Well, let me flesh it out for you. And let me tell you how big the problem is, right?
Right.
That's what we hear from Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount. Okay, so let's take that bigger view of the first commandment. You write in your article, the first commandment, I'm the Lord your God, you should have no other gods before me. You say that even as a pastor, and maybe even, dare I say, especially as a pastor, you've broken that commandment. Talk about what that is.
I mean, I would say that if we understood what this commandment actually meant, there's not a person who could, with a straight face, declare that they had honored it for more than 12 seconds.
Right.
And that would be like right as you start the prayer and before you get into the second line of it. That's about the 12 seconds that you've got.
Yeah.
Because the idea is essentially, like, even going back to the garden, all of the sin that we have is rooted in our desire to be God and to place ourselves ahead of God. And so even the way a lot of times we connect with God, the focus of that connection is on ourselves. It's on what we get or how it benefits us, and in which case we're taking God and we're sort of placing him under us as almost subservient to what we want.
That's good.
And so we have this tendency to kind of essentially make ourselves God, to think of ourselves, value ourselves. We take, how often when we talk about God are we saying like, well, that's not what my God is like, or that's not how I see him. And we kind of place God as if he is in submission to our view or interpretation of him, all of which places us ahead of him.
Yes. So we have a coach here in Pittsburgh who says, the standard is the standard. I mean, if that's the standard, like you say, in 12 seconds into it, I can't touch that standard. Yeah.
What about, let me just say one other thing about that commandment before we leave it. And we could, spend, of course, the next 300 years talking about this one commandment and longer. But it just makes me think, you were talking about that little box we tend to put God in and that he's no bigger than this box. One thing that has really come to light for me over the last couple of years is how often we try to do that with our particular, theological beliefs about God or our denomination or whatever it is that we feel like, okay, so I'm Presbyterian. I come from a Presbyterian background. So clearly that's what God is.
God's Presbyterian.
Yeah, right? Tulip, all that, right? He's in.
Is that PCUSA? Is that EPC? What is God?
Well, I'm EPC, so he is.
Okay.
Yeah.
We tend to see God as a sort of an extension of ourselves, and that even if we don't go that God is exactly what I think, we kind of go, my team gets it the most right, and therefore we have the best, most accurate view of God out of all of them. And it still kind of puts God as being inferior to our conceptions.
Right. So our theology or our belief system is up here, and then God has to be next in line.
Yeah. Okay. So
even we start with I think, I feel, I believe.
Yeah.
Right.
I comes first, God comes second.
Yeah. Okay, so way back, I think in like 1976, a long, long time ago, then presidential candidate Jimmy Carter, in an interview, weirdly, with Playboy magazine, essentially said, I lust in my heart after women. And that blew up. This was, of course, well before the internet, but that blew up all media. That, someone running for public office and a man who would say that he was a committed Christian would say that he was, lusting after women. In Playboy magazine, he would say that, it sort of turned media and certainly believers on their head to think that someone would admit to that. But, in many ways, right, you're saying that you're doing that. That's the same as saying I'm committing adultery, whether not in the flesh, but in my mind.
Yeah, it's one of those weird things that Christians are very unforgiving of people saying what they're thinking. and addressing the attitude that they have in their hearts. And I don't get why we're so like, oh, you're not perfect, therefore we must demonize you. Like, nope, there's only one perfect person that ever was. If that's your standard, you've set it really high for what someone else is going to be.
Yeah.
Because that's the whole idea of Jesus's commands and instructions, is that we can't. I mean, God gives us 613 commands in the Old Testament. And he goes, and we still, okay, well, we'll just follow all those. That was our idea. He gives us you'd think that the hint was 613, you can't do this on your own. But we did like, no, okay, we'll just try. We'll go through and we'll make an effort. And so then Jesus goes, okay, since you didn't get it the first time, let me add on to this so you understand. It's so much harder than you think, because the whole point is you can't be righteous without me. The whole point is you are, I mean, I won't get into the actual nature of it, but Paul describes our best attempt at righteousness as a filthy rag. It's much more graphic, the term he uses for it, but it's a filthy rag before God. The whole idea being it's got to be Jesus' complete and total utter dependence on him, because when we make it about our effort, our performance, our work, we've taken out who Jesus is from the entire process.
So the 10 Commandments weren't given to us so that we would make ourselves holy.
No, I don't think so.
Now, is it interesting to you, or is it sad, or I don't know what it is, but I often think how deeply I think the average human has gotten that wrong. I mean, I would say of all the things that people maybe misunderstand, people who aren't, regular Bible readers, who just don't have a lot of literacy and biblical ideas or teaching or whatever, I think that most people think that the 10 Commandments are there so that we can be good people.
Yeah, I mean, it's the standard of the Judeo-Christian ethic that society and moral understanding is built around. Follow these 10 things, do these 10 things, you can check your I'm a good box, and you don't have to worry about it. Because at the end of the day, we would rather salvation be in our hands than in the hands of something else or someone else. Mm-hmm. Because we are, as Martin Luther said, the default mode of the human heart is religion. And the heart of religion is performance. What can I do? What are the works that I can achieve in order to make myself qualify as good?
Yeah.
Jesus says you're not good, and you're never going to be good. You can't be good. Only I'm good. So you need me.
Okay, so if someone's listening to the show, Tyler, and they're saying, okay, well, I never heard this before. This is different. I thought that 10 Commandments were, I was just going to try to follow them all and be a good person, and you're saying that I can't do that. What would you say next? What would you, if someone says, well, then what do I do? What's the next
There's no
step?
hope for me.
Yeah, on your own. That is the answer of Scripture. On your own, there is no hope for you. Because we have no ability, right? Romans 3 is all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. But then the next part of that is, and are justified freely by his grace through Jesus. And so the point is, you can't do it, so stop trying to do it. The goal, the commission, the message of the gospel is not try and do, it's surrender and be. So your goal is to surrender to Jesus, to give yourself to Jesus so that he can make a new creation in you, because where you can't, he can. And what happens then is our attempts at righteousness are impossible to be good enough. So Jesus gives us his righteousness, covers us in his righteousness when we surrender ourselves to him.
Okay, so Tyler, someone's listening, they're not a believer, they hear surrender to Jesus. What is the actuality of that like? I mean, how do you surrender to Jesus?
It starts, it's a big question, but it starts with a desire for obedience. A recognition that I can't, and I need someone who can. So the whole idea of Jesus being Savior is we have to recognize that there's something we need to be saved from, and that we can't do it on our own. So it's letting go of our effort, letting go of our goodness, letting go of our righteousness, and surrendering, that's submitting ourselves to the instructions of Jesus, saying, okay, I want to be with Jesus, I want to let go of who I am, and so what Jesus says, I want to do, and I want to believe. And so it's kind of this process of, well, this is what I think. Well, it doesn't matter what I think, it matters what Jesus thinks. This is what I feel. Well, it doesn't matter what I feel, it matters what Jesus feels. And so you're kind of conditioning your heart and letting the Holy Spirit sort of take over, and you start feeling that and letting him kind of grow and guide you as you study his word and study him and seek to live not for yourself, but for him.
Excellent. Okay, that's excellent. So then, not me, but Jesus. But then, how do I know what Jesus wants me to be, or what am I? What do I think that Jesus is thinking? How would I go about that?
Well, usually the best way to do that is to read what Jesus says and to follow that instruction. I think the popular answer is do what you want and slap Jesus on it like a stamp. I want to get this job that gets me a lot more money, but requires me to do a bunch of stuff. But I really feel like God's leading me to do that, so I'm going to stamp that with God's seal of approval.
Yeah.
And we use God like that. He's a tool to gratify our own desires and to give us like the justification and excuse for it. I'm using a lot of air quotes for some reason.
It's good.
But ultimately, Jesus tells us in his word what he wants us to be. He sets an example. He's never going to contradict that. And so ultimately, if we don't know what Jesus says, how could we follow it? How do you follow someone you don't know? How do you follow them when you're not watching where they go? It would even look like when we pray, like half the time it's like, are you praying to a God that you actually know? Or are you praying to some spirit in the sky that you call God, but you have no idea what that means?
That's good. Tyler, thanks. I mean,
good to talk to you, Tyler.
This is very complex.
It's a lifetime journey.
Yeah.
If you're just hearing this and you're thinking, I don't know what this is about, there's the first step, and then there's all the steps after.
That's
and
really good.
all of us are on the path.
Yeah. Tyler Edwards, hey, when we came in, we said that you were the author of a couple of books. Give yourself a plug.
Okay. Yeah. So a few years ago, I wrote a book called Zombie Church, which is about kind of how the church has kind of veered from its focus on Jesus and how it often imitates life, but fails to actually offer the life that it pretends to have. And so really just looking at kind of the importance of the mission of the church to be centrally focused on Jesus. So
Terrific. Tyler, terrific to see you again. Glad you were able to be on the show today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, our pleasure. Tyler Edwards, we're just talking to, author, discipleship pastor, Carolina Forest Community Church in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, author of Zombie Church.
Bye, Tyler.
Thanks, Tyler.
this make sense?
Does what make sense?
The cake mix. Duncan Hines,
Oh, yeah.
Betty Crocker,
Yeah, it makes
cake
sense.
mix.
I'll tell you why. The other night, my wife and I were sitting around watching something. And I said,
The Squid Game.
we might have been. I said, do we have any chocolate? She's like, no, but I have some brownie mix. And in like less than a half an hour, we had hot brownies in our hand. And they were super chocolatey. And that made perfect sense to Johnny. They were good. They were so good. So you couldn't
great.
do that. Like if you, I mean, look, you want to. I get it. I'm not a baker.
Are you sure?
I mean, something from scratch. I mean, it's fabulous, right? My sister made from scratch the other day. She showed up at my door. Here, I just made some blueberry muffins from scratch, and they were still hot.
Oh my
And she,
gosh, I
"Yeah,
bet
put
they
some
were
bu-
so
oh, my-
awesome.
Put some butter
I
on those.
love
I was like,
blueberry muffins. Oh my gosh.
But
Yeah.
in a pinch, I mean, even more than a pinch.
No.
That brownie was fabulous. What? Come on. Are you saying it
Listen,
doesn't make any
doesn't
sense?
make sense,
Makes
you
sense
people.
to me.
Listen, this is why.
What?
This is why. Cakes are really simple to make. Now, you can have super complicated cakes, like if you're making, a 7-layer cake or a Boston cream pie, or like there's, but if you're making a basic cake, it's really easy, and it's really cheap.
All right.
So I just feel like, I know that they came about in the 50s when everything was engineered and
Yeah.
pre-prepared, and we were all excited about it. But I'm just saying,
But
I don't think they make sense anymore.
But what if you're like, you're not a baker and you kind of go, I've never done this before. Let me try to.
So you get one set of measuring cups, one set of measuring spoons, and like flour, sugar, and some leavening, and a couple
so
eggs.
for you it makes sense. For me, it doesn't make sense.
I don't know if that's. I think it just does make sense. I think you're just not acknowledging it.
All right. Does this make sense?
Okay.
Recycling.
Oh.
Okay, tonight's trash night at my house.
Gonna get tense.
I dragged the things down all week long. I mean, that's recycling, that's trash. And then I read, well, China doesn't want our recycling anymore. And your recycling company's going, we're only taking like a percentage of that. We want like the pure stuff. The other stuff we're just. So I think, well, I'm being duped. Once again,
Yeah.
we're suckers for falling into this. Then I think, well, forget it. Then I'm not going to spend my time wasting separating plastic from cardboard to. So, quite honestly, it doesn't make sense to me. But then I've been conditioned and I feel
Yes.
guilty about it.
Exactly. I'm with you. Everything you said, I endorse.
So does it make sense?
No, but I'm still doing it.
Me too. And I'm being
Because I
duped.
want to save the earth.
Oh, you're a sheep.
Whatever.
Does that make sense? Over the last month or so, school got back into session. I've seen this thing, on TikTok, devious licks, where students, are wrecking bathrooms, like stealing soap dispensers or taking apart bathroom stalls or stealing fire extinguishers. And then, in the action, showing themselves posting those videos to TikTok. And then it took it another level where the TikTok users have encouraged people to slap their teachers in the head. Now, arrests have been made. People have been held accountable for their actions, but it just shows the power of social media to engage kids in doing stupid, dangerous, and often illegal things.
Well, we could think back to Tide Pods.
Oh, right.
Remember Tide Pods?
Speaking
Remember
of
when that was
stupid.
the thing? I mean, also, I just wrote down a couple from memory. I remember when kids were lighting themselves on fire.
No, I missed that.
Okay. The Blackout Challenge. That was like a couple months ago, the Blackout Challenge.
I missed that too.
Right. You missed the Blackout Challenge? Then there's a Benadryl Challenge. I mean,
hard to keep up
remember
with,
when people wandered,
debauchery.
they were putting blindfolds on and like wandering around outside? I mean, it's you read them in a row like that and you're like, what
Wait.
has happened to society?
Wait.
That this is-
People were really setting themselves on fire?
Yeah, you don't remember that.
No, I'm glad I missed it.
Yeah. Okay.
Wait, Chris, you're acting like,
I just feel like this was big news, and you just.
Mhm, you missed the lightning.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? Maybe in my daily reading, I read stuff like, and I go, people set themselves on fire, and I go, I don't need to read that. I mean, because it's just like
That
so
could be.
stupid.
Yeah.
Why would you engage? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, well, it's true.
Okay.
So there's something sick. We know this about how social media impacts kids. This is why Mark
We could say
Zuckerberg and
this all day, every
Facebook
day.
is, in the hot water it's in.
I'll tell you what. If this would have happened in my high school or my junior high, you would have suffered the wrath of Woody Hebda.
Who's Woody Hebda?
Woody Hebda was my shop teacher. And Woody Hebda, I mean, look, this goes back a long time because what I'm about to say here doesn't exist anymore. Woody Hebda in his shop class, or Mr. Grotenthaler upstairs, these guys had handcrafted paddles that were like cricket sticks. They were long, 3 feet long. Woody had holes drilled in his, so when he swung that paddle, that thing whistled. And the first day of shop class, Woody Hebda would say, here's the deal. We're dealing with dangerous things here. We got saws here. Things are going to cut your fingers off or your hand off or whatever. If you do this wrong, if you approach this saw and turn it on without my permission, I'm going to paddle you. If you do this over here and turn on this sander without, I'm going to paddle you. Everybody get it? Well, of course, sooner or later, 2 classes in, 3 classes in, some coconut, whatever, messing with Woody or not thinking properly, did the stupid thing. Woody said, let's go. He took the guy out in the hall, and you heard that kid get smacked. Sometimes once, sometimes twice, depending upon the severity of the infringement, multiple times. And then that kid came back in, and as funny and as tough as he thought he was, the kid was essentially neutered. And everybody saw that and was like, "Oh, I'm not going to do that. There's no way I'm going to, I'm not going to challenge Woody Hebda. I'm not going to challenge Dick Grotenthaler." And look, I'm not saying, you should be beating on kids. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that at all. But there was something about that fear factor that somebody held in their hand. Believe me, if a TikTok kid, was vandalizing a bathroom, it just wouldn't happen. Because there was a price to pay. Now there's no price to pay. We were talking earlier in the show about, people ripping off CVS or Rite Aid.
Walgreens in San Francisco.
Well, we've neutered society. There's no price to pay. So then any idiot can go out and do what he wants to do. Everybody shrugs their shoulders and goes, well, look, there's a hero there. Oh, what? Look,
Right.
That poor person has been put upon. And so now, they're just gaining back some dignity by ripping off, corporate America. Well, because they've got insurance. Well, that doesn't make any sense.
So I can't even imagine kids being paddled in school. Like, I can't even imagine with that. Christy, does that seem like some kind of crazy,
Archaic?
I was paddled at home.
Were you?
So
Okay.
it's not archaic, but we would never be paddled in school. There'd be a lawsuit.
Yeah.
A lawsuit.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, you're right though about the fear factor, because there was no paddling in my school, but especially our band director, and anyone who's listening to this who went to North Hills High School knows what I'm about to say. Warren Mercer was the band director there. And if you were in band, first of all, you felt very lucky and privileged to be in it.
I bet.
Because it was really hard and it was a tremendous amount of time. And it was rough. That's all I can tell you. It was rough.
He didn't suffer fools
He
gladly,
did not suffer fools
Right,
gladly.
because there was a discipline involved in
Yeah.
the instrument or in the, people marching correctly
Yeah.
in
it was
time.
it was a rough group, and I'm sure people are listening and thinking, okay, that was like my football team, or that was the lacrosse team I was on, or that was my whatever it was. I don't think all of that was good. I'm not like endorsing the whole thing, but I agree with you that I think that we've lost something by throwing it all away.
Why do you think the Marines are the Marines? Right?
Well, well, the reason that they're the Marines is because of the life and death consequences of
because
what
the
they're doing.
standards are so high, for the discipline involved, for the actions that are going to take place, that these guys are just, right? There's a higher standard there. Our standards are so low in society now, right? They're so low.
Yeah, they are. I agree.
I mean, everything's acceptable. Everything's mediocre. I mean, what? So we get rid of valedictorians because we're going to hurt somebody's feelings. So no one climbs for the highest rung on the ladder because, well, then we're all valedictorians. It just doesn't make any sense. I think other societies probably look at American society and go, you've lost it. What was once great, what was once proud, what was once really something special, the idea of democracy in this world, and you paid a price for the democracy. I know I sound like an old man,
No, you don't
shaking
sound
my
like,
fist at a cloud.
That's not true.
But there is something that's powerful
That's
there.
not true. You don't sound like an old man. What you sound like is somebody who is looking at society and mourning, mourning, for a portion of responsibility that we don't have now.
And I'm not saying that I was the perfect kid.
No,
Believe me, I was an
okay,
idiot like
but
a lot.
let's look at the other side of it, which is that there were a lot of kids like was his last name Hebner?
Hebda.
Oh, Hebda. Mr. Hebda, who got off on hurting kids.
I don't think he did get off.
I'm
on
not
it.
saying he did, but there are teachers that did, and that there are adults that did.
Sure. I mean,
and so
ripe
that's
for abuse.
That's part of how we ended up where we are. Is that we had adults who had that level of authority over kids
Always.
and abused it.
So 100%. There's always people who are willing to do that. Of course. I mean, look at the world. I mean, look at what happened to, indigenous people in, boarding schools, or you look at what happened, to the Irish in those schools. I mean, anytime there are children and people who think that they're tough guys or just masochists in some ways, they can ruin children's lives quickly. And that your heart breaks for that.
Right. So I appreciate the fact that society has tried to regulate in some way. So we're trying to
agree.
advocate for victims. We're
I
trying to
agree.
recognize the trauma of it, and we're trying to stand up for people
Because
who've
no
been
one should be traumatized.
because nobody should be traumatized that way. I don't know how, though, we deal with a society where we've got kids who are, on TikTok, they're destroying bathrooms for, a 60-second clip.
So they can be famous.
Or they're going to slap a teacher for that reason, or they're going to set themselves on fire. I mean, to be honest with you, we're not one of those talk shows that acts like we have all the answers and that we're the authority and that we've got it all figured out. I am much more eager to have you all listening hear two people who are trying to figure it out.
Right,
Because things are really difficult
Well,
and
you know what it
complicated.
is to be a parent, and you see how you raised your children and how I raised mine.
Yep.
I mean, we're not perfect parents. Believe me, I screw up
Me too.
with those guys a lot.
Me too.
It's very, very difficult. But I just think, look, anything goes. Well, then you get what you've asked for. Then, if anything goes, then we live in a world of chaos.
Yep, and that's why we have the Tide Pod Challenge, because anything goes.
And then multiply that times 10, and then you just create a society full of coconuts and
So there
vandals.
but there has to be a role for the church in this, and there has to be a role for decent-minded people, which is that you're going to be an adult who handles responsibility well and does not abuse your authority, especially when it comes to people who are dependent on you, like children, and yet at the same time still maintain standards in some way. You have to, if mature, wise people have to be able to do both things.
Right. I mean, look, you see it, play out, in the pantheon of professional sports, where, coddled athletes, from the time that they were in Pee Wee football, then they rise to the pro ranks and they act out. Now they've got, $100 million and no one's going to tell them what to do. We've seen it here in Pittsburgh.
Over and over.
Right. And so where's maturity in the mix? How do you grow? How do you mature as a person if someone doesn't set something for you and you have to work within the discipline of those confines?
Right. Someone establishes authority and you accept it.
Yeah. Or not. And you fail, and then there's a consequence of the failure that you're no longer allowed to participate.
Or you look at a situation like what happened with the Steelers when you had Antonio Brown that wasn't going to submit to any authority. Le'Veon Bell wasn't going to submit to, for different reasons, but they weren't going to submit to an authority. And basically, it was like an organizational breakdown. Right. That's how serious that...
Because a giant piece of the cog breaks.
Right. So when that authority, when valid authority breaks down, then the whole thing falls apart. Everything falls apart, and we're seeing this all over TikTok.
That's right.
But you're not seeing it on TikTok because you don't have TikTok.
I don't care. It's people
because you're not watching. Because he didn't even know about the fire thing, Christy. You know why?
I'm sorry,
he didn't want to know.
I'm sorry. I don't ever want to watch stuff like that.
I'm not saying you should watch it.
I don't know. Look, what about biblical authority? We all come short.
So it's National Dessert Day.
Is it?
And so in the closing, waning moments of the ride home, I thought, this is, so if you had your druthers, you weren't encumbered by cost or having to make it or having to buy it or whatever it is, your favorite desserts, I'm going to ask each of you for several.
Instant brownies, ready in 30 minutes.
Really?
Just kidding.
Oh,
no,
I was going to say, that's so
I'm just
lame.
saying, we talked about that earlier.
Yeah.
But there it is. It's 9:30 at night. I'm going to go, give me that.
Okay,
now
but ideally.
Okay. In a perfect world.
Hit it.
You're asking me now?
Yep.
Well, you know what my answer is going to be because this happens fairly regularly in our house, my house.
Why aren't you living a charmed life?
Well, I kind of am in a way. I mean, because a wife of mine, she likes to cook. Who am I to say no?
So what's the answer?
Out of the oven, a hot apple pie
Oh,
that she herself, Rhonda June, has prepared for moi. And then for years, my boys would go, we don't like apple pie. And I go,
who doesn't
okay.
like apple pie?
All right. And so then Rhonda would eat one slice and then I'd get the rest.
That's fine. Because an apple pie is small.
Well, I'd string it out, last a few days.
Christy,
Number one is cheesecake.
any kind or
Cheesecake.
a specific kind?
Chocolate cheesecake.
From where?
Right.
Any place? Do you make cheesecake?
I do make cheesecake.
Do you?
But if I'm getting it, I'm just going down to the Cheesecake Factory.
Okay, great.
Right,
Sure.
right. Cheesecake, do you have like any cherries or blueberries on top?
All of them.
Okay, that's fine. I want to put a vote in for Boston cream pie.
Oh, yeah, I like it. Yeah.
It's not a pie. I don't even know if it's from Boston. I actually think it is. I think that's delicious.
Yeah.
I very much enjoy that cream layer inside. I also want to put a vote in for any chocolate dessert that has coffee in it.
Really? That's okay. Yeah.
I'm
not
surprised
really-
with how much you love coffee.
I love
That's
coffee.
not a thing for you, Christy.
Coffee cake, is that a dessert?
No, but that's good. I love a coffee
like
cake.
like a chocolate cake with coffee in the
Yeah.
batter.
I don't think I can do it.
No.
I don't
You
think
drink coffee all the living day.
But there's something different about
There
it, right?
is.
There is. Like
There is.
coffee ice cream, I'm like, nah, no thanks. How
I don't-
about
I don't
how about a
think-
coconut cream pie?
That's a lot. That's heavy.
Oh, that's good. Coconut cream?
No, I can't do that.
Lemon. How about a lemon pie?
Lemon meringue?
Yeah.
Bring it.
Nummy.
Bring it. Lemon meringue?
Really? How about hot chocolate chip cookies?
all day.
Me too.
Yes.
Peanut butter cookies?
Fine.
Bingo.
I think a cookie, really, if it's out of the oven, I'm good with it. I don't really care what's in it.
I wish there was a bakery in this building. That's one
got
thing
nothing.
we're missing.
Everything's closed.
Wouldn't it be great if we had a bakery?
There isn't one downstairs?
Nothing.
No.
Forget it.